morning and thanks for listening in. This is Stocks to Watch on BloombergQuint and I'm Mathew. A few of the stocks that we're going to discuss this morning have already moved sharply on Friday's session, but it's important to discuss them nonetheless. My guest today is Avinash Gorakshakar of Profit Mark Securities. Thank you so much, Avinash, for joining me this morning and good morning to you. We were actually wondering on Friday why some of the names like Bajaj Finance were moving so sharply, Avinash, and perhaps we got the reason after market hours. Perhaps someone got a whiff of what was coming. The RBI working group recommendation. First, let's talk about what they've recommended in terms of private banks, existing private banks. They've said that bank promoters should be allowed to raise their stake in banks to 26% from the current 15% over the long term. And this possibly, I thought, has implications for banks like Kotak Mahindra Bank, IndusInd Bank, and also Bandhan Bank. Now, IndusInd Bank promoters have already come out and said this is a positive development. What do you think about this? And obviously, this is still early days. We'll have to wait for it to be implemented.
Yeah, good morning, Alex. I think this news flow, Alex, has been a part of a advisory paper which has been put out by RBI. It's a draft plan, so things have yet got to materialize on the ground to get things actually implemented. But I think the first sense which one gets from this draft paper put out by RBI clearly says that the promoters can raise their stakes from 15% to 26%, and that is definitely good news for the frontline banks like Kotak, Bandhan Bank, typically where the contention with RBI was already there as far as Kotak was concerned. So I think in a sense the markets would definitely be quite happy about it and said these stocks should do significantly well. I think a key player which could benefit significantly would be IndusInd Bank, because the price has corrected sharply from its 52-week high. The promoters have already put out their intention that they are willing to put in more capital in the bank and raise their stake. So this, I think, clearly validates their point. And I think if at all this new draft plan gets implemented and fructifies, then I think you're going to see a significant re-rating in IndusInd Bank, Kotak, as well as Bandhan Bank, where promoter stake issue has always been a kind of a dangling issue with the RBI. So I think clearly a net positive for the banks in the longer term.
Okay, so the second development that I want to talk to you about is perhaps the more important in terms of how it could shape the future of the landscape of the banking space, right? Because you're talking about the possible addition of new banks, and not just new banks. We're talking about the RBI working group having recommended that large corporate houses be allowed to set up banks, and that's a biggie, right? The names that came to mind, of course, were Bajaj Finance benefiting, perhaps also Aditya Birla Capital. Are those the names that you are thinking of as well? Are there any other names that you think one should bear in mind?
No, I think, Alex, this is definitely a very big positive as far as new bank licenses possibilities are concerned. I think the very fact that RBI draft paper has suggested that large NBFCs could possibly convert themselves into banks obviously would benefit players like Bajaj Finance and Aditya Birla Capital, which has got a large diversified kind of financial services product bouquet, and more importantly, have been in the markets for a long time. I think Bajaj Finance has already started moving up on the management commentary also, that they are quite elated and positive on this development. I think more importantly, smaller players like say Mahindra Finance or typically even a Shriram Transport could possibly see a lot of interest here. In fact, some of the small finance banks like Equitas and Ujjivan also could possibly figure out here. The RBI has mentioned that even these small finance banks hopefully could get a position to get converted into full-fledged banks. So I think the news flow is definitely positive, but I think for a player like Aditya Birla Capital, I think the stock price could see a significant re-rating even from current levels, considering the fact that the stock has been beaten down very badly and they have a large NBFC kind of a fund base. As far as Bajaj Finance is concerned, I think this is a kind of a cherry on the cake, because obviously their numbers are already very robust, and I think hopefully within a period of time frame of next 6 to 12 months, if this new regulation gets formalized, then you're going to see a lot of re-rating both in Bajaj Finance as well as Aditya Birla Capital. I think other stocks within the space, as I mentioned to you, the larger industrial groups like say Mahindra or maybe Shriram Transports could also see a lot of action. But these two companies, Bajaj Finance and Aditya Birla Capital, could remain in focus in the very near term.
Now, I know that you've spoken about a group of stocks, Avinash, here, but specifically on two counters, I want to very quickly get your view on it. On Kotak Mahindra Bank from the first group and on Bajaj Finance of the second group, both banks have seen tremendous rise in the past few months. Would you buy at this level?
I think my sense is, I think, from a longer term perspective, any decline is always a great opportunity to enter both these franchises. In fact, Kotak Mahindra Bank as well as Bajaj Finance, if we see the business model and the robustness of their business, I would not be surprised that FY22 would be a significantly strong year. My choice would be Kotak Bank, at these levels. Slightly from a longer term angle, but Bajaj Finance I would prefer a hold. The stock has run up significantly from levels of 4100 to almost 47, 4800. And I think despite the fact that numbers are going to improve now in the third quarter, considering that it has been a festive month, I think in Bajaj Finance we have a hold, and we believe that any dip should be used as an opportunity to accumulate. But Kotak Mahindra Bank, I would not be surprised. We could see a lot of action because clearly from a bank perspective, we could see a very strong robust second half and a very strong FY22. So I think net any decline for both these companies, Alex, would be a good opportunity for a long-term investor, and he can definitely add these on declines.
All of those names that we've mentioned, by the way, are likely to be in focus in trade today. But that brings me to the last counter, Avinash, which is UPL. And there isn't a news-based development that I want to talk to you about. It's primarily the stock movement. And in a market that we have, well, if you say that the losers have not lost a lot of ground, while the gainers have gained tremendously, we have UPL that perhaps has lost just a little bit of ground. And if I look at the last month or so, it's lost about 7 to 8% or thereabouts, trading at 420. It's currently trading lower than its 5, 20, 50, 100, and 200-day simple moving averages. Would you say that this is an attractive level to buy, and why would you say that?
So I think, Alex, as far as the fundamental numbers are concerned, quarter two was a very a good quarter for the company at a operating level. In fact, the company repaid about 700 crores of debt and is quite confident that the second half things could be better in terms of working capital costs and in terms of the debt repayment. Overall, the bigger factor which is now playing out on the United Phosphorus stock is basically the developments on COVID in the European markets. I think markets are slightly worried that if at all if COVID cases increase in Europe, then there could be a letdown in the European markets, and that is probably the reason why the stock has underperformed in the near term. But I would believe that from a longer term perspective, Alex, this is a very robust agrochemical company with a large exposure in the European as well as the domestic Indian markets. And I think looking at the fact that the Arista acquisition has come in, most importantly, barring maybe 1 or 2 quarters, the stock definitely would be a good positional long-term pick for investors who want to invest in the longer term. So I think definitely this looks very attractive. And from a longer-term perspective, I think investors should buy into this company, looking at the next, say, 12 to 18 months going forward.
Avinash, as always, it's a pleasure speaking to you this morning. It's going to be an interesting start because quite a few of the names that we discussed are likely to be moving quite sharply in trade today. Thanks so much for sharing your views today. And to you, dear viewer, thank you so much for tuning in. Like I said, there's going to be an interesting start of trade today, so do stay tuned and watch BloombergQuint for all the news and updates over the course of the day. Take care.